Today, we're going to be assembling and painting a unit of Kroot Hounds to add to my Escalation League army. I'm really far behind on finishing 2,000 points of my Kroot/Tau army, and this unit of 5 Kroot Hounds is going to add a whopping 40 points to that total. Also, these are one of the worst dollar to point value Tau units, with my 40 point squad costing $42. Yeah, you heard that correctly, $1.05 per point, excluding any sales tax that I was charged. So let's get into it. Assembling these guys wasn't hard at all. It was just 2 halves of a body, legs or feet, and a head. One trick that I like to use when gluing things together that have a small surface area is to etch little scratches in them to give the glue some more surface area to adhere to, such as the case with the tiny feet on these little Kroot Hounds. To help speed the process up, I went ahead and primed all of the models white so we can use contrast and speed paints. With these being low point cost, I wanted to be as efficient as possible with my painting time. For the hounds that I wanted to paint green, I feel like GW Contrast Paint Gut Rip of Flesh was the closest approximation of the box art colors. So I just slapped that all over the models and let them bathe in it for a while, trying to sweep away any clumps of paint on the larger, flatter areas, letting the bulk of the paint sit in the recess and wrinkles. We'll get to some more exciting colors here in just a bit. I ended up getting some pretty good coverage in just one coat of this contrast paint. Next, let's look at my absolute favorite contrast paint, Magma Droth Flame. This color is so pigmented and looks great on everything I've put it on so far. We're going to use the same process and just slather this paint all over our little Kroot dog here. It's time to look at a more complicated color. One of my Kroot Warband squads is yellow with brown giraffe spots. I struggled so hard for so long painting yellow on a Skaven army that I started last year, and it was so frustrating I set the entire army down and I haven't picked it up since. Now though, with the help of some other painters, I know the secret to painting yellow. Now stay with me here, but we're going to base coat our model pink. Now let's talk about why that works. I don't know the science behind it, but I do know that yellow pigments are not as strong as other colors. Yellow paints tend to be very transparent. This pink warms up your undertones and creates depth in our yellow colors. Now look just how gorgeous that yellow came out. My second favorite paint, especially for Kroot, is the Army Painter Speed Paint Harden Leather. It's such a good oaky tone. I like to use it on the spines, beaks, and toenails on my Kroot. I also like using it on anything that's leather or wood. I cannot tell you enough how much I like using this paint. For the spines on the skin that have already been covered up by our base color, I switch over to Rhinox hide for a stronger base color. If I use the speed paint on them now, it would just make a brown tinted green when I just want a brown with no extra tint in there. Now, some of you may be wondering, what are the Kroot? Well, according to the official lore, they're a bird-like species, and their homeworld is aptly named Peck, and they are fully accepted as part of the Tau Empire, fighting for the greater good, though we often see Kroot mercenaries fighting for other species or whoever will pay the right price. One of the more interesting parts of the Kroot lore is that they can eat the flesh of other species and use those characteristics to further their own evolution. That means that the Kroot are a constantly adaptable species that can exist in almost any world. And that lore was my basis for painting all of my Kroot in different colors, with the box art typically being that green color, but then I have wanted to do yellows, oranges, I'd even like to dabble in blues. A variety of colors really makes the Kroot in your army fit with their overarching lore. My next step in the process is going to be using Reikland Flesh Shade. It really is my go-to wash for skin. It's nice and warm and doesn't overpower the colors of something living. I wouldn't want to use Nuln Oil in this case because I feel like Nuln Oil is more suited for metals and produced things, not things that we're supposed to believe are living, breathing creatures. As you should be able to see if you're following along, the minis look good, but even with our contrast paint used, I still think they look flat. A wash like this is going to give us an extra dimension to our hounds. To bring back some highlights and tone down the glossiness that washes tend to add, I'm going to dry brush on some Nurgling Green for our green Kroot Hounds. Now I feel like we're really starting to look good. I'm pretty happy with how all this process came out. Now it's just going to be down to the finishing touches. But don't ever let anything get in the way of your creative process. Even if you think something might not look good starting out, trust the process and find out in the end. Even if it's not something you like, at least you learned a way that you don't like to paint, and you can say that you tried something new. Now we need to get these pups based. When I first started my Tau army with a group of Pathfinders and a broadside, I'd painted them in a beach theme, with the inspiration being the shore troopers from Star Wars Rogue One, which is also secretly the best Star Wars movie ever made. But when I joined the Escalation League, I decided I really wanted to start fresh with a new scheme. So now I've decided to use like a wet forest theme. That's why I have this bag of sterilized sticks to dig through to start basing these little guys. I really liked having this guy in a leaping pose jumping over one of our logs. For my basing scheme, I've gone ahead and used AK's Wet Mud effect, Warlord Games Battlefield and Basing Forest Ground cover, and then we went ahead and used AK Moss texture. These three basing materials are the foundation for my forest themed bases. Now when applying this mud, I've tried both using like a little spatula and a paintbrush, and I found that using a paintbrush works best to help me get good coverage rather than just slopping it off with one of those little spatulas. One thing you want to be for sure though is to use an old paintbrush that you don't intend on using on anything else. This, I don't know exactly what it's made of, but it gets very thick and rubbery and really ruins the bristles. So definitely don't use it on something that, on a good brush that you want to keep. And then afterwards make sure you wash it off real good with some water, and then some acrylic thinner can really help get it clean. While the AK basing mud is still wet, we want to go ahead and apply this jungle covering to it. We can just sprinkle it on, and as the mud dries and hardens, it's going to let that basing material stick into it. And even without a varnish, I find that it doesn't fall off very easily. One thing to know about the AK moss is it's literally just little pieces of green dyed foam. So how I apply it is I use some super thin super glue and kind of just sprinkle it on there. And it does make it look more realistic to me if you kind of tap it down, but you have to be careful because with the foam mixed with the glue, it gets very, very sticky very, very fast. So you got to be real careful when pushing anything into it, because a lot of times what I have happen to me is that the foam just ends up sticking to my tweezers or Q-tip or whatever it is I'm using to try and push it down, even sticking to my finger if I'm using my finger to push it down. And that's it, my friends. 40 more points added to my Kroot/Tau Escalation League army. I don't know if I'm going to get done by the end of the year, which was my original goal, but maybe with y'all's help I'll be able to push through and finish out 2,000 points worth of Tau by January 1st. See you guys next time.